So Austin's mother was looking out for his best interest by asking me not to file to put him on child support. And so with Joseph paying the rent, I stopped working because Melbourne had gotten hurt at daycare and he fell and gashed his eye. He started going there when he was about 9 months old, so he wasn't even a year old yet. And he gashed his eye open. And the women in Conroe, Texas, well, I was working actually in the Woodlands, Texas, and that's a very rich city, full of whites. And they were being extremely racist to me on my job. I had gotten a job at the home department in the Woodlands, Texas, the Woodlands Mall. So it's a very high end mall. And I was a black woman, and people still consider me a black girl, but I'm a woman. And they were treating me like a black girl, and not really respecting me as a person or an individual. And very disrespectful to me. And so I continued to work there in the home department. I was getting paid about $10 an hour. And they were harassing me. I was a cashier and they were harassing me to the point where they were making me cry on my job, on my lunch break. And they were trying to stage fights with me, the white girls and the white women. And I wouldn't do that because I already know I'm a black woman, considered a black girl. And if I fight these white women that are bullying me on my job, that's what they want. They want to paint you out as the angry black woman. No one could ever say that about me on my job. I always had white men come into my job at Taco Bell and say, "You should make Andrea the manager. Why is she just an associate? She's running the store. She's polite. We love when she takes our order, and we're going to do surveys, and we're going to ask if they will make her a manager." And they started to make me an assistant manager at Taco Bell in Conroe, Texas. And the white women started to abuse me on the job with the black men when they were about to start training me to be an assistant manager. I did not understand racism in this country at all. I was completely oblivious to it. And the fact that I was so well mannered was because my mother, Tony Ray, taught me to be well mannered. She had a master's degree. She was very intelligent and educated. And a lot of people know my mother, and they know that when you see me screaming, it's because someone is doing something to me. It's not because that's the way that I behave. My mother did not teach me to behave that way. This made a lot of the whites very angry because they wanted to stereotype me on my jobs. And they had other black women trying to harass me and fight me on the job, as well as black men for basically just being a stand-up individual that had a job that you could not say was ghetto and all these mean things they like to say about black women. Now, if you push me far enough and you bully me enough, then yes, you will see the sister come out of me. I will get loud. I will get angry. I will get ghetto. And sometimes I get an accent. But that's only when pushed too far. And so these people have begun to start altercations with me to try to get a rise out of me, to lie about my character. So they ended up getting me fired from that job at Taco Bell. Well, no, I actually quit because of the way the white women were trying to abuse me on the job, not wanting to really see me come up. And so when I was at this job at JCPenney, they were trying to do the same thing. And this job was paying me more, and they were making me cry. And my son had gotten hurt at a daycare where there was supposed to be a white woman watching him, and my son never got hurt with me. And when I had to leave and come to the daycare to pick him up and take him to the emergency room, he had an open gash where you can see the meat in his eye. He was not even 1 year old from her not really watching my son. And he was the only black boy, besides another mixed race child, young black boy, in the facility. And he was mixed with white and black. And she allowed my baby boy to gash his eye open. And they didn't have enough teachers with the amount of infants that she had. I looked up the state rule, and if she has more than a certain amount of infants, I think about 4, she's supposed to have an assistant in the room with her. And she had about 7 infants or 8 infants or more in the room with her, and was watching my son and other infants and allowed my son to get hurt. So my son had to get liquid stitches in his eye. And I just noticed that they were not really feeding him properly. He was going to Prestige Academy. They are changing the names and closing down businesses where my son and I were hurt and where people knew evidence about us being hurt. And they changed the name of that school to Westwood Academy in Magnolia, Texas. And they're trying to cover up evidence that I was a great mom and that my son was hurt in their facility due to the negligence of the staff. And so I started watching Melbourne at home. I had gotten a job at the Fairfield Inn cleaning rooms. And again, they had white men coming into the into the hotel rooms, harassing me, and making it seem like I was not doing a good enough job, and I was actually doing a better job than the Hispanics on the job and the other black women, because I wasn't a dark-skinned black woman. And there is a stereotype in America that if you're a dark-skinned black woman, that you can work harder than a light-skinned black woman. And I'm light-skinned, but I'm not light enough to really be considered light-skinned based off of the racist stereotypes of passing a brown paper bag test. But I still have to deal with the woes of being a light-skinned woman when you have to prove that you can work harder than dark-skinned women on the job, but you don't get recognized for any of it. That they continue to make it seem like dark-skinned women do a better job than you. And they were smoking weed on the job, and they were, being lazy and half-assing on their agenda for the day, and they were putting their work that they didn't finish off on me after my shift was over and I had completed all of my tasks for the day. And the white men were asking me if I could stay over and complete the task that the Hispanics or the other black women did not complete, and then they did not want to pay me overtime. They agreed to pay me overtime, but then when I got my check for the overtime, they were taking me in the office and writing me up for getting overtime when they asked me to finish their work for them. And so I ended up just quitting because I couldn't stand the abuse in the workplace, and the fact that my son was being neglected in the facilities and being harmed. He was hurt as well. And so I stayed at home. My rent was already being paid by Joseph O'Vera, and I had saved up enough money to be able to pursue my music career. I was young, and I always wanted to be a singer. I had planned to go to medical school. I was working as an in-home caregiver, and I wanted to be an anesthesiologist when I met Austin, my baby daddy, and he's white. And I didn't want to get pregnant. I didn't want to have kids until I finished medical school. And I wanted to be a singer, but I had put it behind me when my mother died when I was 23 years old. And I had $100,000. I had my own studio, but people just wanted to rob me and they wanted money, and I was always alone, and I didn't have any kids, and I couldn't trust anybody. People were always trying to set me up and rob me. And I ended up giving away everything and just wanted a normal life. So a lot of people think like, oh, you want money, but you may not understand the changes that you'll have in your life when you have money. That people very close to you will try to set you up and do things to harm you because you have money. And I gave it up. I didn't want, but I also gave up wanting to sing. And so I didn't make it to medical school. I ended up getting pregnant and ended up in an abusive relationship. And I was working at a hotel and I had saved up enough money to just kind of become a little independent. And I said, I want to get my recording studio back and I want to start back recording music, but I didn't want to go mainstream. I just wanted to kind of stay underground and I just wanted to do it for myself, just to say that I did it, that I wanted to record an album. I grew up in a time where there were a lot of underground artists, white women, black women, Hispanics, men, where everybody didn't have to be on a major record label, where there were a lot of indie artists. And they inspired me a lot because it was a lot of great music back then. I'm a 90s baby and I grew up in the 2000s, and there were a lot of independent artists that really inspired me. And I just wanted to just record the music for my sake and just have my own recordings. And so I started purchasing um, the equipment from Z Sounds to record my music in the house with Mel B, my son, because I was a stay-at-home mom at that point and he was doing great. And I was like, well, I want to be productive even though I'm at home with Mel. And I was going to start back working once he turned 2 years old because I feel like at that point he could talk and he could walk and I could get him enrolled into the Magnolia Prestige Academy that was close to my house. That way I didn't have to drive across town to the Woodlands in case anything happened to him. So everything that I did was in the best interest of my son. And so I had started hooking up my recording studio and I had bought me a desktop. I think I went to Renter Center and got a desktop and I taught myself how to record my own sound on the, I think it was FL Studio, and I had Pro Tools. And Melby, he was a great boy. He was a good boy. Like, we had a really good life. And they were jealous. Women in my family were jealous. Women in Austin's family were jealous. Women all over Conroe, Texas were jealous of me, and they were trying to call me a kept woman, saying that like I was a slave, like I was a breeder, for being in a house with a baby by a white man. And God said that Joseph O'Vera made a lot of money, and he said that he made a lot of money to be able to take care of my rent, and that no one should be faulting me as a black woman for having someone pay my rent when I had a 1 year old child. And God said that I made the right decision to stay home and raise him because he was 1 years old and because others were allowing him to get hurt. And that I made the best decision as a mother to stay home with him at 1 years old. So God said to the women who were trying to say that I was a deadbeat mom for staying at home and raising my baby, he said Joseph made enough money to pay the rent. And she had a 1 year old baby. And then Austin got out and got her pregnant again. So he said I had the right to stay home with my kids and that I would go to the shelter and get a job to get on my feet and get away from Austin. And they didn't give me that opportunity. They wouldn't let me into any of the shelters. So I'm going to go back to when Austin got out of prison. So before Austin got out of prison, they had gangs, racist white gangs with blacks who were in the white gang as well, surrounded my home. and trying to murder me in my apartment while Austin was in prison. And they were trying to murder me and my son in my apartment while Austin was in prison because they were racist and they were angry because Austin was in prison for abusing us. And they lied and said that he was in prison for the assault on a public servant, but I was the one who called the police on him. And so Austin got out of prison. I raised Melbourne at 1308 Houston Street from December 2016. Well, he came home October 2016, but or November 2016. He was born October 28, 2016. And Austin went to prison December 2016, and I raised him from January 2017, that entire year, all the way until July 2018. So Melbourne was 20 months old when Austin got out of prison. And all of the pictures that I show of me in Melbourne with no men in the house, no black people in the house, no white people in the house, just me and my son in my home. You see me in my work uniform from the Fairfield Inn. You'll see me in my work uniform from JCPenney, showing that he had a great mom and he had a great life. He went to school, he went to daycare, but when he started getting hurt, I raised him at home myself. I did what I had to do as a mother. They were not watching him properly, and I was not about to keep taking my son to get stitches in the emergency room. You're a professional being paid to watch my son. You should not be allowing him to get stitches. And so you saw me raising my baby boy. And Austin got out of prison July 2018. And his mother, Cynthia O'Vera, and his father, Joseph O'Vera, and I, in Melbourne, drove down to Huntsville